As the Ottoman Empire entered the 19th century, its leaders faced a growing realization that survival depended on change. Military defeats, economic weakness, and internal unrest made reform unavoidable. In response, the state launched ambitious programs aimed at modernization, equality, and centralization. Yet, despite these efforts, reform failed to save the empire. Foreign pressure, crushing debt, and unequal privileges granted to European powers undermined unity and eroded sovereignty, turning reform into another chapter of decline. The first major wave of reform emerged from the need to modernize the military. European armies had surpassed the Ottomans in training, organization, and technology. To close the gap, the state introduced new military schools, adopted European-style uniforms, and attempted to create modern units loyal to the central government. These changes faced fierce resistance from traditional forces who viewed reform as a threat to established privileges. Conflict between reformers and conservatives slowed progress and weakened effectiveness. Reform soon expanded beyond the military into administration and law. Ottoman leaders sought to strengthen central authority by reducing corruption and limiting the power of local elites. New bureaucratic institutions were created to improve tax collection and governance. In theory, these measures promised efficiency and stability. In practice, weak enforcement and resistance at the provincial level limited their impact. The gap between policy and reality grew wider. One of the most ambitious goals of reform was equality. Facing nationalist unrest and European criticism, the state declared that all subjects, regardless of religion, would enjoy equal rights under the law. These promises aimed to create a shared sense of citizenship and loyalty to the empire. However, equality on paper did not translate into equality in daily life. Religious divisions, social prejudice, and administrative inconsistency prevented real integration. Foreign interference complicated every reform effort. European powers used the language of reform and minority protection to justify involvement in Ottoman affairs. Under the pretext of defending Christian populations, foreign governments pressured the empire to adopt policies that often weakened central control. Reforms intended to strengthen the state instead became tools for external influence. Economic pressure proved even more damaging. As military and administrative costs rose, the Ottoman state turned to European lenders for financial support. Loans provided short-term relief but created long-term dependence. High interest rates and repeated borrowing trapped the empire in a cycle of debt. Eventually, foreign creditors gained direct control over major sources of revenue, including customs and taxes. Trade agreements further reduced economic independence. Special privileges granted to European merchants allowed them to trade under favorable conditions, free from many local taxes and regulations. These arrangements benefited foreign businesses while damaging local industries. Ottoman producers could not compete with cheap imported goods, leading to unemployment and economic stagnation. The contradiction between reform and reality deepened social divisions. Muslims resented reforms that appeared to favor non-Muslims under foreign pressure. Non-Muslims, in turn, distrusted reforms that failed to deliver genuine equality. Instead of uniting the population, reform policies intensified suspicion and resentment among different communities. Administrative reform also suffered from inconsistency. New laws were introduced, but implementation varied widely across regions. Local officials often ignored reforms or adapted them to protect their own interests. Without strong enforcement, reform remained symbolic rather than transformative. The state appeared modern on paper, but weak in practice. Foreign powers exploited this weakness. Diplomatic pressure, economic control, and military threats limited the empire's freedom of action. Even reform-minded leaders found their choices constrained by international politics. Decisions had to satisfy foreign interests as much as domestic needs, undermining legitimacy and authority. As reform failed to deliver stability, nationalist movements gained momentum. Groups seeking independence viewed reform as insufficient or insincere. Each rebellion justified further foreign intervention, creating a cycle of unrest and external pressure. Reform became associated not with renewal, but with loss of sovereignty. By the early 20th century, the reform project had lost credibility. The empire remained divided, economically dependent, and politically fragile. Efforts to modernize had revealed the depth of the crisis without resolving it. Reform could not succeed in an environment where unity was broken and independence compromised. The failure of reform was not due to lack of vision. Ottoman leaders recognized the need for modernization and equality. The problem lay in timing, resistance, and foreign dominance. Reforms introduced too late and under constant external pressure could not overcome centuries of structural weakness. In the end, reform exposed the limits of imperial adaptation. Attempts to balance tradition with modernity, sovereignty with foreign influence, and unity with diversity proved impossible. The empire entered the modern age without the economic strength or political independence needed to survive. The story of failed reforms and foreign pressure reveals a central lesson of Ottoman decline. Modernization alone cannot succeed when imposed from above, resisted from within, and manipulated from outside. For the Ottoman Empire, reform became a symbol of both hope and helplessness, marking the final struggle of a once great power to control its own future.